Okay, now we're on to slow actions. Slow actions are performed during your unit's turn instead of the 2 quick actions. Remember that under normal circumstances you only get the slow action for that turn, so make sure it's a wise choice. First up, aimed shot. So an aimed shot is an alternative to the shooting action. It uses all the same stats as a regular shoot action, but can't be used by a weapon that is in the explosive class or that has the blast tag. First, check to see if the unit they're targeting is within range. Now, you roll a single attack against that target and reduce that weapon's accuracy by 1. This means if your accuracy is 4 to hit, it is now reduced to 3 to hit for this shot. On a success, the target is dealt no damage, but you get to choose a critical hit to apply to that target outside of torso damage. I'll explain how awful this can be during the next video. If you miss, then nothing happens. There are some qualifiers for this action that prevent it from being the only thing you'll ever want to do. First of all, it can only be used against a target that is unobstructed. That means that you can see more than 2/3 of the unit. This is where your tactical skills come in handy to get your opponent into the right spot. Second, weapons in the beam class can't be used in an aim shot against a unit that has beam shielding or an eye field. Next up is boosting. I've mentioned boosting a bit in the movement video, so I'll just clarify a few things about how it should be used. Boosting is essentially using the jets on your units to move around. This movement can be done in any direction and is always double your current movement speed. Boosting lets you do anything that you would do with a movement action, except for the exceptions that boosting is unaffected by any terrain that would cut your movement speed, like dangerous or difficult terrain. If you've suffered leg damage or some sort of unit debuff, it can be cut in half, however. Boosting is actually the only way to cross sheer terrain, and you have to start and end in non-sheer terrain. While you're boosting, you can move over any terrain that's about 1.5 times your height. You can also use it to move straight up or at an angle in the air as long as you land on something flat that your unit can fit on. You can move in any direction you want to with the boost action, even places outside of your vision. But remember that you don't rotate when you move, you start and end facing the same direction. Units that don't have a boost instead have what's called flank speed, which we'll cover when we go over vehicles. Next is slow reload. Slow reload is a reload that takes up your whole turn. That's about it. If you remember the weapon video, most weapons with slow reload are the ones that can deal the most damage. Just make sure you duck and cover before doing a slow reload. Piercing Strike. This is actually a melee thing. You might see some melee weapons with the PS tag on them. This means they can use this action while equipped with said melee weapon. This is good looking on paper, but... So Piercing Strike can be used against any unobstructed opponent within 12 inches of the unit using it. The attacker immediately moves into close combat distance and fights a close combat as normal. But during this combat, the attacker and defender roles don't trade places. This will make more sense later. Also, the defender has their armor and shield value bonus reduced by 1. It says value to a minimum of 1, but I think they meant that your defense pool is reduced, so simply reduce the amount of dice you roll for shield and armor by 1. So this is not great, because if you lose advantage in that close combat, that means that your opponent gets to attack first, and they get all of the benefits of this attack, so all the debuffs are applied to you instead. So yeah, be careful when you use this. Oh boy, evade. So if you're playing the 2.01 version of the rules, you also have the evade slow action, which is an action you can perform. Yeah, I'm not very excited about this one. Let me explain why. Evade is an action introduced in 2.01 update that was designed to help units move into melee distance against foes that were very far away. So here's how it works. You announce that you're using an evade action. You can give the unit an evade token as a reminder or whatever you need to do. The unit has to move at least half of its boost distance or its movement value this turn. When it does this, it gains an additional armor die to its defense pool. If it moves the full boost value, it gains an additional armor die to its defense pool. This movement has to be made in a straight line, and you cannot make any turns during this action. This movement is treated as a move action and must be made in line of sight, unlike a boost action that can be done in any direction. Word from higher up was that it does not say that you can't turn like a boost or flank, it just says cannot go in any direction like a boost flank, but the actual ruling does in fact say you may not make turns outside of moving through your line of sight, so do what you want with this one. Future me, put the actual text of the evade action up on screen right here, just so I can show it. So the kicker for this one is that these bonuses only last until the end of the turn that you are doing the action, or until that unit enters close combat with an enemy. So yeah, it's a worse boost. I don't know what the idea for this action was, but it feels like a colossal failure. However, if you play in alternating actions, meaning that you activate a unit, then your opponent activates a unit, then the turn ends once both of you have gone through all your units, it's actually not that bad. However, in the version that Skirmish is intended to be played, this action is fairly worthless. The benefits don't last long enough to matter, and you can't really evade like the description implies. You just kind of walk at the enemy with your guard up, and then lower it before they can even strike you. Whatever, nobody's perfect. Moving on. So we'll take this time to go over weapon tags. In the last video, I actually talked about all the weapons and all the tags they should have. Now let me explain what those tags mean. Blast. A blast weapon shoots as normal, but upon a hit, they attack each unit within 6 inches of that target. When that happens, all units around that main target roll their defense against a single attack from that weapon, and take half of its damage rounded down if they fail to block it. It's worth noting that units in the blast zone don't take critical hits from the splash damage, and if they can see the unit that's getting hit within their sight arc, they can use their shields to block it. Also, as a quick side note, the explosion does not apply piercing to the splash damage. Disposable. These are your one-time only weapons. After it's been used once in any action, you can mark it off your unit sheet and it becomes unavailable. It's important to know that these weapons, just like your first melee weapon of choice, don't count towards your carried weapon unit, so you can have multiple of them along with your 2 carried weapons. Fire. You can guess what this one is. Weapons with the fire tag use a flammable chemical to light a target on fire. If the weapon does any damage to a unit, you put a fire token or a gray ball of cotton next to that unit while this effect persists. During the upkeep of that unit's next turn, you roll its armor without any modifiers to see if it has any blocks whatsoever. If it does not have any blocks, it takes 1 damage. If it has any blocks, it takes no damage. If it only has blocks, then the fire is extinguished. This continues until the fire is extinguished or the unit is destroyed. Also, if you can enter any sort of water terrain with that unit, the fire is immediately extinguished. Limited ammo. This is for weapons that only have a limited number of rounds on hand. These are usually weapons that have been shown to just run dry during the manga or anime that they were shown. Weapons that have this tag cannot be fired if they are used in a shooting action that results in only rolls of 1. If you want to have fun with this, you can add an extra ruling that if the unit withdraws from combat and redeploys to the field, they can have the weapon reloaded. Multi-targeting. I talked a bit about this last time, but multi-targeting weapons can split their shots among up to 3 different units within range. You decide how the shots are split before you roll for the attack. Penetration. So depending on which version you're playing, this tag does some different things. In version 2.0, your opponent must roll to use their shield against these attacks, and their defense dice must follow the rules on the penetration table. If you're playing version 2.01, your opponent may use their shield as normal and applies the 2.01 penetration table to the attacks. Either way, penetration weapons deal 1 damage to the shield's integrity if they decide to use it. If you're crazy, you can implement the bonus ruling on penetration, which allows you to treat units that are in cover as though they are unobstructed. If you want to know why this is a bad idea, try playing a match with it and discover how meaningless cover becomes. Point blank. This indicates that a weapon can be used in close combat instead of a normal close combat weapon. So you need to have the weapon equipped and have your opponent within your sight radius. When you do this, you don't benefit from a dexterity modifier during close combat, and you use close combat modifiers rather than the ones I explained during the shooting video. Piercing Strike. I just explained Piercing Strike, but just to hammer it home, the debuff is to the defender's armor and shield pool, and it cannot drop to less than 1. If you lose the advantage roll, the debuffs are applied to you. Reload quick and reload slow. You take a second and reload your weapon. It is either a quick action or a slow action. That's all. Sniper. This is a tag that's usually only applied to rifles, but it can actually only be given to cannons or beam weapons and tacks 10 points onto the cost. If the unit using this weapon doesn't move in the same turn that it fires it, you can roll 2 dice on the attack and keep the higher one. If your weapon has more than 2 attacks, I'm being told that it reduces the rolls down to 2 and you still only keep the higher one, so Spray. So this tag is almost identical to the blast tag, the big difference being that it can be fired under minimum range, and if the shooting unit is within the splash zone of 6 inches, they don't take any damage from it. Volley. Volley allows your weapon to essentially ignore terrain. So when you use a volley action with a weapon, you choose a unit within your sight arc, even if it's behind cover. You roll a d6. On a 1 to 3, the attack misses. On a 4 to 6, you conduct a shoot action as normal but ignore the terrain between units. There are limits to this though. You can't use a volley action if you couldn't shoot for any reason, like, part damage or you're just restricted in some way. Or if you have less than 12 inches of vertical clearance, like you're inside of a building and there's a roof or a cave ceiling above you. Or if you're a beam weapon because they are not designed to arc normally. That's actually it for this one. Next time will be the melee video, and we'll talk about part damage too.